Today on the Pro-Life Podcast, is Wendy Davis gonna go to jail? And the FDA says prenatal screenings may be wrong 85% of the time. We have to talk about this. Let's get started. But with us today, real quickly, my friends Kim, Jackson's joining us today. Good to have you back, brother. Veronica, we hung out all weekend, partying in San Antonio. I'm Brent. So, yeah, this FDA thing.
Jackson, tell us about it.
So,
no pressure.
The FDA has finally admitted that these prenatal tests, these non-invasive prenatal tests, can be inaccurate up to 85% of the time. It's new news to them, but it's not new news to people who've been watching. All the way back in 2014, there was an article that sort of highlighted this great tragedy because many pregnant mothers are choosing to abort their children based off these non-invasive prenatal tests. And now the FDA has finally come around and said, yes, that could be the case. And that means
they're wrong, that they're incorrect diagnoses.
Correct. And so now that means there could be thousands and thousands of prenatal human beings, preborn children, who are being killed, even though their pregnant mothers theoretically would not have aborted them had they had known the truth about the actual preborn child's condition.
Wow. Yeah. And these are the tests where blood is drawn from the mother and they test for like different disabilities, potential disabilities, or other conditions for the preborn child. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, and what's happening is they test for different risk factors associated with potential genetic conditions of the preborn child. And what they're finding out is that there's a false positive rate up to 85%. So that means 85% of the time, the child's testing positive for a potential condition. That diagnosis is incorrect.
Yeah.
So let's just doing the math. So 15% right, 85% wrong.
And it's not supposed to be a diagnostic tool. It's supposed to be just a test to see or to determine different risk factors.
Right.
But people are using it as a diagnostic test.
Yeah, I remember when I was pregnant, I was offered these tests, and thankfully I have an amazing pro-life doctor. So there was even no need for us to have really at-length conversations about like what if it was positive, because she knew that I would never consider abortion, and then even if I had, she would have probably tried very hard to urge me not to. But one time we did talk about, just for a few minutes, about what would it be like if someone else came in and got a positive test? And she was like, oh, well, what we would do next is do another series of tests to confirm, because really this test, the quad test, they call it, it's just like an initial screening to look for risks of genetic anomalies. And then they would narrow it down and do another test to confirm. So there's a lot to talk about here. They're using this initial screening to make a life or death decision for their child. They're not going necessarily getting the subsequent test in order to confirm the issue. And then there's the whole quality of life judgment. Like, why abort this child in the first place? Like, why? Yes. That's terrible. And then a pro-choice person might say, oh, it's so tragic that these tests are inaccurate and that people are making this decision because their baby could have been healthy in the first place. I'm like, how about it's tragic to abort anyone at all, whether they're sick or healthy?
Right. The children are dying. That's the real stake in this situation. But even if the tests were right 100% of the time, it would still be wrong to abort a child because, like, for any reason, but especially because of the disability. That is absolute discrimination. And what's really shocking is when you look at people who are abortion advocates, they often are advocates for people with disabilities once they're born. But before birth, it's like, oh, no, we don't want that child to have a disability. We better kill them. They're better off dead.
So, Kim, you're our media and communications person here. And so you focus on messaging. Do you think it's smart for the pro-life movement to sort of highlight how inaccurate these tests can be? Or should we focus on that pro-life message you just talked about?
I think both. I think from a practical perspective for the people who are in the clinics and they're having these tests on their preborn children and they don't realize, number one, this test is likely to be wrong. And number two, just like you said, Veronica, that even if this is just the initial test, even if it's correct or it indicates that it could be correct, that future tests are needed. So I think it's important for us to highlight that these screening tests are often wrong, like the FDA is saying. But the more important thing for us to do as a pro-life movement, as a culture that values life, we need to affirm that children with disabilities are inherently valuable and that have the same moral worth as you and I.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and instead offering alternatives or even just resources, I was going to say, offer good resources to parents whose unborn baby has been diagnosed with a disability. And I think it could be really, really good and useful to get these tests done because that way you can prepare. I've definitely heard some pro-lifers who have advocated for just like not doing the tests at all, but I think that could be a mistake unless a parent just chooses, I'd rather not have the test. By all means, that's fine. But I think it'd be really, really useful and helpful to know ahead of time my child's going to have these sorts of special needs, physical or intellectual, mental disabilities. And that way you can prepare. And there's so many good resources. So let's talk about some of those.
Abel speaks. Man, like our hearts just go out to that family. It's a nonprofit organization named after this little boy named Abel, A-B-E-L. And whenever he was born, his family, before he was born, his family found out that he was going to have trisomy 18 and that would cause him to pass away pretty soon after birth. But what the mom says, and I always remember this, is instead of giving our child an abortion, we decided to give him a name. So that helped them cope with this diagnosis, that helped them seek God in this really difficult time. They chose life. They honored his life for the few short days that he lived. And now they help other families who receive those other diagnoses, because it is true that families who receive these diagnoses, especially if it's going to mean their baby's not going to live for a long time, I cannot imagine how heartbreaking that is.
If you want to cry a river, I suggest you go listen to their testimony.
Yeah, it's on our YouTube.
Whether you want to cry a river or not, you should go listen to their testimony.
It's true.
It's beautiful.
Yes, but you will cry a river nonetheless.
Yes, disclaimer.
Just be ready.
So they've come to the Capitol multiple times, and each and every time they leave the audience, the members of the legislature in tears because their circumstance or situation, their story is so heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time.
And they're so strong. They're clearly extremely devout Christians, and they just talk about how God gave them the strength, the supernatural strength to get through all of this. And so what their mission now is to help parents whose unborn children have specifically been diagnosed with a life-limiting diagnosis, so that they know that it's extremely unlikely for their child to survive long past birth. So that's a beautiful, very effective ministry. And then there's also what about the children who don't have any sort of life-limiting diagnosis? They just have a physical or an intellectual disability. It could be Down syndrome. It could be that they're born with, or in utero with a missing limb. I mean, these people could have absolutely wonderful, beautiful lives, and this diagnosis is leading some people to choose abortion. So instead, what they can do, there's so many of these amazing resources. I mean, the government will help, but there's also really, really great nonprofits out there, like Protect Texas Fragile Kids.
Yep, we talked about them last week. They're amazing.
They're amazing. There are so many other orgs specific to helping children with Down syndrome. And then also, I personally here at Houston, we're all in Houston right now, there's this absolutely amazing organization called Brookwood, where people with disabilities, whether physical or intellectual, can live and work there. And so what they do, they really focus on like the beauty of work, and that is a natural human desire that God gives us. And so and people want to feel valuable in the work that they do and that they create, so that like work is something that you can give back to God. And
right. It's like sharing in the creation, you know?
Right. Not that like, oh, I've heard the argument, like the utilitarian argument, like people with disabilities can't provide anything to society. And that's just absolutely despicable. But when you completely reframe that to like, people long to work. People long to do whatever God's mission is for them. That's what Brookwood just totally capitalizes on. And so they find out not what you can't do, because maybe you're in a wheelchair, or maybe you can't read, or maybe whatever. No, they find out what can you do, and they find out what this person's strengths are, and they find a job for them. And it's so cool. And I have so many stories because I love volunteering there, but one always stands out to me. So they have people of all varying levels and degrees of capabilities, and lack of abilities. And so this one woman in particular had come in. She's a little bit elderly at this point, very depressed, had lived a life of basically just a shut-in because she'd been on government resources for a long time and really didn't have any family left to take care of her. And so finally someone got her connected with Brookwood. She started living there, started getting really good health care. And then they were trying to coax her out of her shell emotionally, to speak. And she was like, I can't do anything. I don't want to do anything. And she was paraplegic, so she couldn't move very much at all. But they had this beautiful clay workshop where they make like Christmas ornaments and they sell them to help support the needs of this community. And so what they asked her if she could just let them use her arms to hang the ribbons on her arms so they could tie the Christmas ornaments and then put them on the tree. And that was her job. That was her job for years before she eventually passed away. And she was just so happy and smiling because that was her work. That was her work she was able to give back. I was like, that is so sweet, because they found, like, what is it that you can do for God? And it sounds so simple. Yeah. But it's beautiful.
Studies have consistently shown, too, that people who aren't disabled consistently underrate the quality of life of people who are disabled. Because I think as society, we value intelligence, we value our brains and our mental capacities. And so when someone is disabled, especially if they have a mental disability, we must think, well, they have to be suffering, because who would want to live that way? Turns out they love their lives. Yeah. They love living, and they love what they can do.
They're often happier than the average person rates their own life. So in these surveys, it's like, okay, on an average, like, how happy are you? Maybe I'm a 5, maybe I'm an 8, whatever. And people who have disabilities often, especially with Down syndrome, rate that they are very satisfied and happy with their lives. So it's just this projection of what I think your value is. And when we get into that situation, you're going to have a bad time. That's where bad things happen, like abortion.
And they make the world a much better place.
It's true.
Their mere existence is a positive force in the world, and we can't underestimate that.
It's true.
Yeah.
Speaking of making the world a better place, looks like Wendy Davis might go to jail.
Oh my gosh, that transition. Let's go to break.
But before that,
It's a hot take that we'll have to explain later.
Right. Okay, we'll come back to that in just a minute. Texas Right to Life is facing 14 lawsuits from Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry. They're suing us because we helped pass the Texas Heartbeat Act. And they're trying to scare us pro-lifers into backing down. Please join us in the fight against Planned Parenthood and donate to protect the Texas Heartbeat Act. You can fight for the unborn and build a pro-life Texas that values every human life. Go to texasrighttolife.com/lawsuit to make your contribution. Every cent will help, and it's greatly appreciated.
Social media companies are hiding pro-life content from you. Fight back against big tech. Text pro-life to 40237 for direct access to the best pro-life news. Since 2019, our web traffic has been down 90% because of big tech censorship. Stay ahead of the censors. When you text pro-life to 40237, you're in control, not some algorithm telling you what you can and cannot see. Join now. Text pro-life to 40237.
So welcome back, and yes, I set that up. We need to explain a little further. Wendy Davis has filed suit against the Texas Heartbeat Act. She crawled out of whatever hole she's been hiding in to file a lawsuit. And there's some history with a certain Wendy Davis.
She's our favorite person.
That's a name I've not heard in a long time.
Well, yes. You were in the Capitol
I
when
was.
she first came to infamy. Can you explain some of that?
Who is Wendy Davis?
Okay, Wendy Davis was a senator for a while in Texas. Praise God. She is no longer a senator. She had a brief stint, tragic failure of a run for governor, and she's had many failures in her life. She also failed to prevent the dismemberment, or excuse me, the 20-week ban from passing in Texas. Yes. She failed in her run for governor. She should just really stop.
And
just,
she
like,
failed
quit
running
while
for
she's
Congress. She's a serial failure in life.
Oh. Well, this is Hot Take Day on the Pro-Life Podcast.
Her life is valuable. Let's say
she
that
is
much.
a child of God, and she's very, very
And-
misguided.
Both are objectively true, though.
It's true.
We pray for Wendy and hope that she can find the Lord and...
But she cried.
yeah.
So yeah, she got super, super famous back in 2013 during the Texas legislative session. She attempted to filibuster at the very end of the session to prevent the 20-week ban
Didn't the
from
Obama
passing.
administration
Reborn
make
pain.
some tweets about that or something?
Oh, yeah.
He tweeted, "There's something special going on in Austin tonight."
Yeah, and then the Satanists were like praising her on Twitter, and
then they came in person and decided to praise her.
I mean,
and
there was some. Actually, this was really quite funny. The Korean like cartoon channels made memes and cartoons about it, and I was like, "You don't know what you're talking about, but they are pretty funny."
Yeah.
And I don't speak Korean. It was all like subtitle, but it was an internationally big deal.
Yes.
And then she was wearing pink tennis shoes during the entire 13-hour ordeal. She technically filibustered for 11 hours, but she stood for 13. It was a technicality. And at midnight, clock struck midnight, the session ended. This was literally the last day of session. And we were up for several hours after that trying to figure out, like, did she win or not? What actually happened? Yeah. Like, did these points of order against her mean that the bill was going to pass or not? So it was a huge ordeal. And so they called a second special session, and we won. And thank God, the 20-week ban, yeah. But
So
now
there's
she's
her
back.
But there's our backstory.
Yep.
So she has filed another lawsuit against the Heartbeat Act. But in doing so, made some comments that technically
It could land her in jail.
land her in jail.
Maybe.
Makes me weirdly happy. Is that bad? I'm like,
Well, Jackson, tell us about it.
I'll get there. I just want to.
blame you.
make some brief comments about Wendy Davis, and I want to be as charitable as possible here.
that's kind of you.
Okay.
But
Better than I've done.
she seems to be very passionate about killing preborn children, and somehow she thinks that because she donates to pro-abortion organizations that any threat to them constitutes an affront to her. And she also is desperate for attention and relevance again. So I think this new stunt is arising out of a sense of insecurity, of narcissism, and a very strong passion for killing babies.
Yeah.
You're probably right.
And it's tragic when you think about her real backstory. I mean, she's had at least one abortion before. She was in an abusive relationship that she got out of. But I remember you said the other day, Brent, that something was really interesting to me. Your origin story is when you choose to be a hero or a villain.
Yeah, really,
and I was
all villains and heroes kind of have similar origin stories. There's a tragedy that happens, and the villain goes, "I'm going to get even," and the hero goes, "This ain't happening again on my watch."
yeah, so
And-
she chose villain.
Yeah.
She chose villain. She you can go watch on YouTube like the clips of her filibuster, a failed filibuster, and about like all these sob stories of women who need to be able to kill their children so that they can achieve their dreams, and like so she like she can
pro-woman.
become a lawyer and all this stuff. I was like, it's just awful. It's just awful, and I don't know. You could say that because she was so genteel in her approach that maybe she's just a misguided soul, but I don't really think so. I think she's coming back with a vengeance, and I want to point out the people who follow her, like the people who were in the Capitol that day, more than one day in a row, because there were multiple hearings, but especially on the very last day. Like I was there working in the Capitol full time. I saw all of this myself, and it was crazy. There were thousands of people recruited to come to the Capitol to stand in protest. And then, of course, thousands more pro-lifers came. And we color-coded ourselves for convenience. The pro-life crowd decided to wear blue. I don't really know how this happened, but I mean, hey. And then the pro-abortion crowd decided to wear orange. Well, so one day I got confused. I was in a hurry. I put on a blue dress and a bright orange purse, and I walked in, and the state troopers pulling us and like checking our bags. He looked at me like,
What are you
what?
doing?
And then I was like, I'm gonna text Right to Life. And he's like, okay.
Well, she wore orange, and that might be prophetic
Well, pink
because
tennis shoes.
Or
too.
Veronica.
Is it the new black?
Or Veronica's
the new black.
just a big fan of the Auburn Tigers or Florida Gators
No,
or any
who
other
knows?
blue and orange
This is
team.
funny.
she's an Aggie.
But no, the people, I meant to say, the people who follow her, all these recruited protesters. So, there's 2 rotundas in the Texas Capitol, an indoor one and an outdoor one, and they decided to take up residence, and some of them were literally performing seances on the floor, like seated around. It was freaking creepy. And then they started a chorus saying, "Hail Satan," and it was deafening. I mean, these are marble walls, and they were screaming, and then, as if that wasn't enough, they started dipping feminine hygiene products in red paint and throwing them. This is our Texas Capitol, and the Senate prides itself on decorum and, gentlemen and women of order, and like they were literally throwing fake bloody tampons. I was like, oh my god,
class.
Are you sure they were fake?
well, stop. So anyway, this one woman, a picture, and we're gonna show a pic. I was like, we have to show a picture, and we were planning this episode. There's this woman who we took pictures of. She was happy to let us take pictures of her. She's bald, has some crazy tattoos, but the main thing she went infamous for, viral in the pro-life circles, she's a poster, handwritten, that said, "Free abortion on demand, no apologies." And this was the sentiment. This was not like your average American pro-choice woman who wanted to protect her rights. Like, these were Satanists performing seances, yelling "Hail Satan," and it was scary. It was scary. And so we took a lot of time to pray during that time, and thank God there were pro-lifers there. They kind of like squeezed people out of the rotunda and took up their own residence and got a box with a microphone and started doing like praise reports and singing praise and worship. And I was like, okay, sing a little louder, please.
Yeah,
Like, oh,
yeah.
it's great. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great.
For sure. So what's Wendy Davis up to now?
So now that we've had a lot of
All of
fun
that,
sharing our
yes.
discursive stories, we can actually start to digest the headline and
Oh, yeah. Why is she
understand
going to
it.
jail?
Okay, so let's break it down. And before Roe v. Wade, there was a pro-life law. There still is technically a pro-life law that bans abortion here in the state of Texas. And Roe v. Wade actually originated in Texas and targeted our law. But what the Supreme Court said is there's a quote-unquote fundamental constitutional right to abortion for the pregnant mother. And so it said the state cannot enforce that aspect of the law and similar laws across the country. But what the law also said is that it is illegal to furnish the means to an abortion. So this is not the aspect of the law that says you can't have an abortion or perform an abortion. It's a part of the law that says you can't assist in someone else's abortion. Well, the Supreme Court never addressed that law, and it's still sitting there, left unsettled
So
to
it's
this
still
day.
illegal to aid and abet.
Yeah, or furnish the
technically.
means is the technical language, and
Pay for
technically
an
under
abortion.
technically under state law, you can say it's still illegal to obtain any abortion from fertilization or to perform any abortion from fertilization, but the state can't enforce it
Because of Roe v. Wade,
they've
yeah.
been enjoined by the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court has not enjoined the state from enforcing the furnishing the means aspect of that pre-Roe pro-life law.
So the Supreme Court has not said that there is a constitutional right to pay for an abortion.
Not explicitly, no.
You have this dichotomy between the right itself, or in the case of abortion, the so-called right itself, and then the furnishing of that. And so you have that precedent, and the fact that we have laws on the books that still say that there is not a right to furnish the means of an abortion, to pay for an abortion. Wendy Davis has admitted to doing that in court. How did we get there?
Do you think that she knew that this was going to be a problem
When she
sued the state over this?
Well, I think it's unlikely she'll end up in jail, despite what our hot take headline says.
The point is that she could, though. Like, the greater point
On a
is that
technicality, she could, yeah.
we see this, the greater point is that the pre-Roe v. Wade statutes, the laws before 1973 in Texas, have not been repealed.
That is true.
And so that's also involved in some of our cases in Travis County, where the city of Austin, surprise, is using taxpayer dollars to fund the means of abortion and things like that. We're not going to pay for the abortion itself because they legally can't, but we'll pay for the groups that fund the logistics of your abortion, your travel and whatnot.
And it also matters because the Supreme Court's about to rule on Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health organization. And if the Supreme Court does reverse Roe in that case, suddenly we may have actionable pro-life laws across the country that can go into effect once again. And the states who don't, for instance, have trigger bans like we do in Texas will have another means to enforce an abortion ban throughout pregnancy. So it's very critical that people understand this legal theory, because I don't really think it's a theory. I think it's fact.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to get there. This all came to light because Wendy Davis, trying to be relevant, has filed the 22nd lawsuit against the Texas Heartbeat Act. She's trying to allege that because the Texas Heartbeat Act prevents organizations like the Lilith Fund, and Wendy Davis is affiliated with the Lilith Fund.
Which was named after a demon.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about Satanism all day.
I mean,
Right.
Well, I could say you could Google the origins there.
No,
but,
Maybe just take our word for it.
Yeah.
So Wendy Davis says that because the Texas Heartbeat Act prevents us from funding abortions after the child's heartbeat is detected, then that violates my right to abortion and all this stuff. And it's really grasping at straws. This is a really pathetic attempt to try to take down the Texas Heartbeat Act. And it might backfire because she had admitted to illegal activity.
Well, specifically, her involvement is nonsense because no one's threatened to sue her under the Texas Heartbeat Act.
Nope.
She's not the actual abortion fund like Lilith Fund. She's just someone who donates to the Lilith Fund. She faces no threat of lawsuit. She's not said she's attempted an abortion under the Texas Heartbeat Act. She's not said she's obtained an abortion under the Texas Heartbeat Act. She says she's donated to an organization to whom others have either passively and in one circumstance expressly said they have an intent to sue. So they're not threatening to sue you. So why is your involvement crucial? In fact, your part of this case should be thrown out.
Imagination.
But I think it's just because she wants relevance and she wants attention in the media.
Possibly.
Shock.
Also, I mean,
Wendy
they're
Davis?
desperately
No.
trying. They know that all the other lawsuits against the Texas Heartbeat Act are about to fail. So maybe they're just trying one more last trick.
Yeah.
Well, so
Time's a ticking.
it's Wendy Davis and three others. The other three are Lilith Fund and two people who work there. So basically, three people with associations with the Lilith Fund and then Wendy Davis, who just donates to them,
She's just
are suing four different pro-life Texans. One of them is State Representative Briscoe Cain. Two others are private citizens who said they want to investigate the Lilith Fund and other abortion funds, but said they don't have an intention to sue. Someone else has threatened to sue. So this is the abortion industry trying to find one last way to take down the Texas Heartbeat Act because it is saving so many lives. Half of all preborn children every single day are saved here in Texas by the Texas Heartbeat Act.
Yep.
And this is their last-ditch effort to, hopefully on their part, strike it down.
Yeah,
but
well,
I think like the others before it, it's doomed to fail.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm loving all these Wendy Davis failures.
Awesome. Let's add one more to the list. So even if we don't get jail, we still have fail.
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
Oh,
That was so cringe.
I'll let myself out.
How do we follow that, Bryn?
that was quite the dad joke. That's wow. On that note, I think we are going to call it a day, guys.
Thanks.
Someone maybe needs to
Didn't
nap.
you say someone bought Twitter?
Oh,
yes.
Well,
Ooh, guess who? Not Wendy
That
Davis.
is a lost all control. Okay. Well, yes. To update from last week, we talked about a certain South African American making an offer to purchase one of the largest social networks and big tech giants in the nation, in the world. And people kind of losing their minds about that. Turns out, as of very recently, that looks like it's going to be a thing that happens. It's going to go through.
And it
like
has
it's-
happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's happened
technically,
today.
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So there's,
Elon Musk
I think there's still
is
some
buying
details
Twitter.
and paperwork and lawyers and things. But yeah, Elon
Yeah.
Musk is buying Twitter. And I think for the first time in my life, I can say I am excited and interested in what happens in the future with Twitter.
No. Pro-lifers might
That-
have a more even platform again.
Put camera this way.
Jackson has something to say.
Being optimistic about Twitter, no matter who owns it, is a fool's errand. So Brent's going to be disappointed in the end. You know, I think Elon's an upgrade over the leftists in San Francisco. But, I mean, just look at Twitter. There's no saving that.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a dumpster fire. Also, we can't rely on anyone's savior, right? Like Elon Musk's not gonna save the pro-lifers so he can have a platform. We can't. I mean, I'm secretly hoping he'll become super pro-life one day.
I agree.
But I mean,
I'm
We
just
can't rely on
happy that there's the potential of free speech returning.
oh, same.
And that's what's important here.
Yeah.
Time will tell.
But someone mentioned a minute ago, I forget who said, what if he just lets it crash into the ground?
That was true.
What if
yes.
he buys Twitter literally to let it die? Wouldn't that be
Buy
funny?
it and delete it.
Delete.
He said he was
Oops.
going to do that for Facebook. He
That's
would
fine.
love to do that for Facebook. Just
Wouldn't
buy
that
it and
just
delete
be
it.
so great? There'd be so much more freedom in the internet.
It's, you know, people will be scrolling less and maybe going outside and talking to their friends or something in person. Weird.
knows?
I don't know. Anyways. Well, yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for today. So thank you guys for watching. We will see you next Tuesday.